Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man walah. All praise to Allah Subhanahu wa taala for allowing us to finish the last chapter, which is chapter 4, and we are moving on to the final two chapters of my book, which is chapter 5. Then after that, we move on to chapter 6. That's the final chapter. So chapter 5 talks about creation of the earth from the Islamic perspective. Okay, whereas chapter 4 that we've discussed all this time since what? I think since June or July, I think June, when we started our discussion after the break for Ramadan and Shawwal. That chapter, chapter 4, talks about the creation of the earth from this scientific perspective. Okay, and we talk about the position of the earth in terms of this solar system, the creation of the sun, the moon, right, and the atmosphere itself, and then the 4.5 billion history of earth, right? We have covered that, and the impact on, you know, our life, and to put everything in perspective. So we have covered that in chapter 4. So we're not going to go back and talk about the scientific perspective. We're going to move on in this chapter 5, and we're going to see from the Islamic perspective the sources for the story of the earth creation from Al-Quran and from Hadith and from the Islamic tradition. Then we're going to analyze that, and then we're going to compare it with, you know, the narration from the Judeo-Christian perspective, from the Bible itself. And we see where there are similarities and where there are differences. Okay, so this is the actually what you call it in a nutshell, the content for chapter 5. Okay, what you can see the picture here, right? I purposely, deliberately choose this picture because this picture depicts a flat earth theory, where everything is flat, and then after that, towards the end, the edge of the earth itself, then it's void. Okay. Why I choose this? Because according to the traditional Islamic narrative, the earth is flat. And it actually similar to the Judeo-Christian perspective from the Bible itself, that the earth is flat. Okay, and there are a number of similarities we're going to see between these two traditions. Okay, now let's start with the main source of Islamic law, Islamic Sharia, and Islamic, what do you call it, sources. And what is the main source? The primary source, of course, is the Quran. Okay, let's look at the Quran. In the Quran, if we analyze the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the creation of the heavens and the earth in 6 days. Oh, you can't see my finger, something's wrong. Okay, 6 days. Okay. The 6 days of creation of the heavens and earth, these 6 days are being mentioned in 7 different verses, in 7 different surahs. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala scatters these verses in 7 different surahs. So you have 7 verses in 7 different surahs. And it is quite interesting. Of course, nothing is coincidental in the Quran. And everything, and in fact, there's nothing coincidental in this universe. Nothing is random, nothing is coincidental, everything has been planned. That is our belief system. The 6 articles of faith, the number 6 is belief in qadar and qadar, and qadar and qadar. We believe that everything has been predestined by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything has been recorded in Lawhul Mahfuz from the early creation, every small things. So no such thing as, oh, this is something new, something coincidental that even God does not know. That is of course absurd. Okay, it might be from in other religious belief, but in Islam, no, everything is within Allah's knowledge. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala deliberately put that 7 verses of 6 days creation in 7 different surahs, and the number 7, it might be, yeah, this is what we can interpret. You might be wrong in our interpretation, but Well, we are given the freedom to interpret whatever we want to interpret as long as it's not against the principles of Islam. So it might be that it is, it shows that there are the creations of the heavens and the earth in 6 days produce 7 heavens and also 7 earth. So there are 7 heavens and 7 earth and 7 verses in 7 different surahs. So these seven verses in 7 different surahs in the Quran, right? It can be found from the first verse in Surah Al-Araf, and this is the sequence of Al-Quran's Quranic surahs. Okay, so the first verse you can find in the first verse you can find in the earliest surahs in the Quran according to the chronology of surahs in the Quran, and it is Surah Al-Araf. Surah Al-Araf in juz number 9. This is juz 8, right? Juz number 8 in Al-Quran. Verse 54, Allah SWT says here, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن ربكم الله الذي خلق السماوات والأرض في 6 أيام, which means surely your Lord is Allah. And who is Allah? He is the one who created the heavens and the earth in 6 days. Okay. Then Allah repeats the same thing in the verse after that in Surah Yunus, Surah Yunus, that is chapter 11, verse 3, in juz number 11. Allah SWT says here, Inna rabbakumullahu alladhi khalaqas samawati wal arda fi 6 ayyam. The same verse, verbatim, exactly is what in Surah Al-Araf Allah repeats in Surah Yunus. Surely your Lord is Allah who created the heavens and the earth in 6 days. So not much difference. It's just a repetition of the same verse. Now we move on to the third surah and the third verse in the third surah, which is in Surah Hud, which is immediately after Surah Yunus. So it's chapter 12. Okay, and it's also in juz 12. Allah SWT says here in verse 7, الذي خلق السماوات والأرض في 6 أيام. He it is who created the heavens and the earth in 6 days. So instead of Inna Rabbakumullahu alladhi, Allah SWT just shorten it to alladhi. And the rest of it the same. Alladhi khalaqa samawati wal arda fi 6 ayyam is the same here. Alladhi khalaqa samawati wal arda fi 6 ayyam. So Allah drops the first 3 words of these 2 verses in Surah Al-Araf and Surah Yunus. So it means that He is the one who created the heavens and the earth in 6 days. And then the 4th verse in Surah Al-Furqan, verse 59. الذي خلق السماوات والأرض وما بينهما في 6 أيام. He who created the heavens and the earth and all that is in between in 6 days. So there's an additional word here, وَمَا بَيْنَهُمَا, and all that is in between. So this is an additional info that we cannot find in the first 3 verses that talks about the creation of the heavens and the earth in 6 days. The rest is the same. الَّذِي خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ فِي 6 أَيَّامٍ is the same. Now we move on to the 5th verse. In Surah As-Sajdah, verse 4, Allah SWT says here, الَّذِي خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ وَمَا بَيْنَهُمَا فِي 6 أَيَّامٍ. It is Allah who has created the heavens and the earth and all in between them in 6 days. The same verse. So Allah repeats again. Right, the verse in Surah Furqan, in Surah Sajdah, verbatim, Alladhi khalaqas samawati wal arda wa ma bainahuma fi 6 ayyam, with the additional word, the word Allah here. Whereas in Surah Furqan, there's no word Allah there, right? But the rest is the same. So Allah repeats the fact that Allah created not just the heavens and the earth, but anything that's in between them in 6 days. It means that Allah created everything. Everything that is contained herein, the 7 heavens and also the earth in 6 days. Not just the heavens and the earth, but also all those things that Allah ordained to exist in those 7 heavens and also on earth itself. That is the 5th verse. Now we move on to the 6th verse. The 6th verse in Surah Qaf, verse 38, Allah SWT says here, وَلَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ وَمَا بَيْنَهُمَا فِي 6 أَيَّامٍ وَمَا مَسَّنَا مِن لُغُوبٍ. There are additional info here. What is the additional info? We created the heavens. وَلَقَدْ means verily. Verily we created, or surely we created the heavens and the earth. And all between them, وَمَا بَيْنَهُمَا is still the same info that can be found in the 5th and the 4th verse before. But then Allah SWT put the additional info. What is that? وَمَا مَسَّنَا مِن لُغُوبٍ, nor did any sense of weariness touch us. We are not tired. We do not feel any tiredness from these creations of the 7 heavens and earth. So this is a direct refutation to the Judeo-Christian tradition, the Jews and the Christians who believe that after the 6 days of creation, God rested. From what? It might be from being tired of these creations, after 6 days of creation, but God rested. Why you rest? Because we are tired. If not tired, we don't rest, right? So Allah SWT refutes this thought, this belief system among the Christians and the Jews that God is like any other creatures, that God can feel tired. God cannot feel any tiredness. It is impossible for God to feel any tiredness. Why? Because God is infinite in everything, in his power, in his knowledge. So when an entity is infinite in all sense, infinite in power, how can there be tiredness? Tiredness is just a concept given to a limited amount of energy. When the energy has been exhausted, you reach to the limit, and therefore you cannot move on further, or you slow down. So the concept of tiredness has been given to that action, right? Why can't you work like before? I'm tired. That is just a concept. That is the name given to that. I've depleted my energy. Right? I do not have unlimited amount of energy. So it is impossible. It's illogical for God to feel tired, because we believe that God is infinite in every direction. There is no limit to God, God's characteristics. There is a limit to God, entity itself, which is 1. God cannot be infinite in its number. He must be 1. Okay, he must be 1. But in all other aspects of Allah's characteristics, he must be infinite. If he's not infinite in his characteristics, then he is a creation of something else. And then he become, a creature, not the creator. Okay, so that is the additional info in Surah Qaf. Now the 7th verse in Surah Hadith, the last verse in the last, not the last but the last surahs that contains these creations of the heavens and the earth in 6 days in Surah Hadith, and that is Juz 27. Towards the end of Juz 27, verse 4, Allah SWT says, وَالَّذِي خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ فِي 6 أَيَّامٍ. It's a summary of everything. So after Allah SWT talks about Allah created, right? This, the first verse, verily Allah created everything in 6 days, the heavens and the earth in 6 days. And then Allah says, Allah creates the heavens and the earth and everything is within it in 6 days. Then Allah SWT says, Allah created everything, the 7 heavens and the earth and everything within it in 6 days, and Allah does not feel tired from those creation. Then Allah summarized everything, right? The most important thing that you should know, and that's what the creation of the heavens and the earth took place in just 6 days. Finish. So it's a very succinct, it's a very apt conclusion to all those 6 verses before it. It's a very short one. وَالَّذِي خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ فِي سِتَّةِ أَيَّامٍ. Finish. He is the one who created the heavens and the earth in 6 days. So these are the 7 verses in Al-Quran that talks about, the creation of the heavens and the earth, and the number is 6. Now, we know, and we have discussed way before, when we talk about the creations of the heavens, that the creation of the heavens took place in 2 days. And we have discussed on what those days were, right? And it's defined as days that is long epoch of time, long period of time. It's not the 24 hours period of time, right? Because it's impossible to have 24 hours period of time when the sun was not there yet, and the moon was not there, and the earth was not there. So day also, the word day itself, D-A-Y, day, according to Arabic language, also can mean long period of time. And that is why, right, we call it as the day of Qiyamah, Yawmul Qiyamah, the day of Qiyamah. It's not 24 hours period of time, that is too short, but it is considered as an epoch, a long period of time. Okay, so that is what they call it, day. So the creations of the heavens took place in 2 long periods of time, or 2 uneven periods of time. And we've discussed that. What are those 2 periods? I'm not going to repeat it. But minus 2, we have 4 days left. And so these 4 days are devoted to the creation of the earth. 4 days. Okay. And how do we know 4? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala specifically, deliberately mentions in the Quran that the creation of the earth took place in 4 days. And where is that verse? You can't find in all these 7 verses, because all these 7 verses are very brief, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave a detailed explanation on what happened in those 4 days of creation of the earth. And that is in Surah Fussilat, verse 9 and verse 10. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says here, قُلْ أَإِنَّكُمْ لَتَكْفُرُونَ بِالَّذِي خَلَقَ الْأَرْضَ فِي يَوْمَيْنِ وَتَجْعَلُونَ لَهُ أَنْدَادًا ذَلِكَ رَبُّ الْعَالَمِينَ وَجَعَلَ فِيهَا رَوَاسِيَ مِنْ فَوْقِهَا وَبَارَكَ فِيهَا وقدر فيها أقواتها في 4 أيام سواء للسائلين. صدق الله العظيم. قل, say, أئنكم لتكفرون بالذي خلق الأرض في يومين. Is it that you deny him, Allah, the Lord, who created the earth in 2 days? So are you denying the existence of this Lord that created the earth in 2 days? وَتَجَعَلُونَ لَهُ أَنْدَادًا, and you join equals with him, and you created shirik for him? You associate something else to him? ذَلِكَ رَبُّ الْعَالَمِينَ. This is the Lord that created the created the earth in 2 days. He is the Lord of all the worlds. And what are these worlds? Open for interpretation. Of course, past scholars say is the world of the jinn, the world of the humans, and the world of the malaikat. And other scholars say no, it's the world of the malakut, which is the metaphysical being, including the jinns and the jinns and the malaikat, and the world of the humans, and the world of the non-humans, animals and plants. And some scholars say, no, it's limited to the world of humans and the world of plants and the world of animals. So, open for interpretation. And you can also interpret the Lord of the worlds. It refers to all the 7 heavens. It can also refer to the 7 heavens, the 7 earth. So it's open for interpretation. What does this word worlds mean actually? It can be everything. Right? So Allah deliberately make it vague to allow us for different interpretation. Now, verse 10 after that. وَجَعَلَ فِيهَا رَوَاسِيَ مِنْ فَوْقِهَا. And he set on earth, he refers to Allah, he set on earth mountains, standing firm. Rawasiya. Rawasiya means like ra'sun. Ra'sun in Arabic means head. So rawasiya is the plural form of ra'sun. So mountains majestic on earth surface, standing firm, high above it. Those are the mountains. وَبَارَكَ فِيهَا. And Allah bestowed blessings on earth. Here, Allah SWT said, Baraka fiha. Here refers to earth. So Allah blessed the earth. With what? With nourishments. With the ability to sustain life. That is the blessings that Allah gives earth. And one of the greatest blessings of earth is that we have a magnetic pole. One of the strongest magnetic pole of the four, the four rocky planets, the four small planets, Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars. Right? Of all these four rocky planets, only Earth have a strong magnetic pole or magnetic, we call it magnetic line. And this is very important because it actually protects the Earth from all those dangerous particles, radiations from the sun. Because the sun is a producer of all these dangerous particles that can cause cancer and can kill humans. Because the sun is basically, a nuclear station. It's a nuclear fusion. It's an engine for nuclear fusion where Allah fused together two hydrogen atoms to become one helium atoms. So in any nuclear power plant or nuclear, whatever you call it, there must be radiation. And that radiation is very dangerous for us, creatures that have very fragile cells. Our cells consist of, the middle of the cells is the DNA. It's just a combination of all those proteins. And it's very fragile. You just give one radiation of a very energetic electron and it can just disrupt those DNAs and break all those DNAs apart. And there you have, the cells will die, or it can mutate itself, it becomes cancerous and so forth. But Allah protects us from all these dangerous radiations from that huge nuclear engine of the sun itself. By what? By that strong magnetic poles that Allah created for Earth itself. So that is part of the blessings that Allah given Earth. You can't find such strong magnetic, envelope for a planet in other planets, Venus and Mars. And that is why if humans stay on Mars for a very long period of time, they will be exposed to all those dangerous radiation. Okay, and most probably the life will not be long for people who stay on Mars because of those dangerous radiations. In fact, those people who go to space often, they are exposing to themselves to those dangerous radiations, if not for their spacesuit, which is specially insulated, and if not for their spacecraft, which is specially insulated, they will die easily. And look at those pilots. Don't talk about those, astronauts beyond the Earth atmosphere. We talk about just pilots itself. Those regular pilots have been flying for donkey years. They are always up there in the high altitudes, and therefore they are more exposed to the dangerous radiation from the sun itself. So they are more predisposed to skin cancer. Even though there's not sufficient research being done, but whatever research has been done right now shows that yes, they are more predisposed to skin cancer, whatever cancer, because they are exposed to radiation from the sun, because they are at higher altitude. So this is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protects life on the earth's surface. This is part of the blessings that Allah gives on earth. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Baraka fiha. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَقَدَّرَ فِيهَا أَقْوَاتَهَا. And Allah measured therein all things to give them nourishment in due proportion. Qaddara means in due proportion. So Allah sets down on earth and Allah sets the parameters for life on earth. So which creature will eat from what creature? This creature will be the predator of that creature. This creature needs another creature. So the whole ecosystem has been set by Allah, and it's a fragile ecosystem. You take out one creature, it will affect other creatures. It's just like a domino effect. Or people say like a butterfly wing effect, right? People say it's a random effect, but we know that it's nothing random. It's just a concept that we try to give to something that can't be explained by mathematical equations properly. So it's random. But that is something that is part of the system itself. And we human beings have been disrupting this ecosystem for a very long time. We kill creatures, we cause creatures to go extinct. And we thought that, yeah, okay, that goes extinct, then that's it, too bad for them. But it has impacts on other animals that rely on that extinct creatures for their food. But of course, the other creatures, they can adjust. Allah can allow them to adjust and seek food others from other creatures. Yeah, it can happen, right? But there are some disruptions, there are some disruptions on life on Earth. So there are always disruptions, right? When we try to cause this balanced ecosystem to go off balance by whatever mischief that we've done with our hands and our technologies and so forth. So before all these things happen, Allah SWT has set the parameters. That is what is meant by Allah give nourishment, and Allah said everything in due proportion. Okay. And certain creatures will appear on this planet Earth after certain creatures went extinct. And that is, of course, due to Allah's decree. And we have covered this in last week's lecture and previous weeks, that there were a number of mass extinctions of creatures on planet Earth itself. The greatest one was between the Cretaceous and also the Jurassic period. Or is it? No, let me see. I forgot that thing. Oh, sorry, between the Paleozoic and also Mesozoic period era, right? So there was this greatest extinction at 250 million years ago. Then there was another extinction, another great mass extinction between the Mesozoic and the Cenozoic period. So all this era, right, between the Paleozoic, Mesozoic, and Cenozoic, why the scientists have this, what they call it, classification, because they are being differentiated by mass extinction. So the extinction that occurred between the Mesozoic and Cenozoic era, which caused the extinction of the whole dinosaur creatures, right? They were wiped out from this planet Earth. But that extinction actually cannot compare to the extinction between the Paleozoic and Mesozoic era, because this extinction caused, some scientists say, it's a rough estimate, between 80 to 90% of, creatures, species, phylums on this planet Earth to go extinct. What caused this extinction between Paleozoic and Mesozoic? We do not know. But between Mesozoic and Cenozoic, we roughly almost have that high confidence to say that it is caused by the great asteroid that hit Earth somewhere on the Gulf of the Mexico, somewhere out there. So that caused the extinction of the dinosaurs and give rise to another creatures. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decree all these things to happen. Okay. And all these things Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in 4 days. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says here sawa'an, in equal proportions. So this equal proportions is what? This is very interesting. Because there are different interpretations for these equal proportions. I will go into detail later on from the word equal proportions here, because that is the key. 4 days in equal proportions for those who ask. Right? So for those who ask here, it means that those who ask, how did Allah created Earth in 4 days? Right? Allah SWT says creation in 6 days, so 2 days for heavens, 4 days for Earth. So how did creation happen in those 4 days? So Allah SWT said, this is the story. This is the story in a nutshell. You want to go deeper, you want to know in detail, go search for yourself. Right? Allah is not there in the Quran to spoon feed us every detailed information. You find it. This is just a guide for you. The Quran is never a scientific book. It's not a book of science, nor is it a scientific book as in what is being defined by scientists as what is scientific. Okay, so those who say, let's discuss about scientific Quran. No, that is a misnomer. That is what they call it, something, yeah, what is that word? I forgot that word. It means that it is illogical lah, okay, to have that word. Because Quran is a book of belief system. There are things in the Quran that you cannot measure, you cannot observe. You must believe, only believe. And Quran's purpose is guidance. Whereas when the word scientific itself, the word scientific means it must be subjected to scientific testing, scientific theory, scientific law, scientific experiment. And all these scientific things, scientific theory, scientific experiment, scientific law, right, scientific testing, they are only applicable only for those that are, what do you call it, measurable, quantifiable. Okay? They can be observed, and the experiment can be repeated. Whereas in the Quran, there are things that are metaphysical. Angels, jinn, heavens, no, not heavens, paradise and hell, roh. All these things are not subjected to our senses. They are not measurable. The experiment cannot be done on them. What more if you want to repeat that experiment? So it is a misnomer. It is wrong to use the word scientific for Quran. So how to apply science to the Quran? You can only say this, that science is just a tool to understand the world. And what is this world? All this world, this physical world, there are signs for that greatest, not the greatest, for that great creator. When I say greatest, there must be comparable. So we don't say greatest. We say that great creator, the only creator. And that's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. His greatness, his supremeness, his omnipotence can be somehow appreciated through the tools that human create. From, of course, the tools that we create is from Allah's, what do you call it? From Allah has bestowed upon us from this brain. Okay. So what is among that tool? And that tool is that what we call as science. Okay, so the science is the tool to understand the science of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is the universe. And so that ultimately we can appreciate his greatness. Unfortunately, not everyone can appreciate the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even though he's a scientist and he discovers this and that, but because he's not being given guidance by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So those who are not being given guidance by Allah, even though they have all the tools in this world, they are the greatest scientists, but they cannot reach to that science of God. They cannot reach to that objective of, what studying all this physical universe is all about. Of course, for the betterment of our fellow human beings and to assist us to become the Khalifa for this earth, and to quench our thirst for knowledge, to satisfy our curiosity. All these are secondary effects, but ultimately for Muslims and for what Allah wants is to get to know who is that creator. Okay. Allah SWT can only allow people to know that from guidance. And that guidance is something that is sacred that Allah gives to whomever Allah wants. It is the work of Allah. Allah mentions it very clearly in the Quran. Allah says, for example, in the Quran, I forgot which surah, innaka la tahdi man ahbabta walakinna Allah yahdi man yasha. You cannot give guidance to whomever you want, but it is Allah who gives guidance to whomever Allah wants. So that is the purpose of science, number one, objective number one for us to study science. All right, so these are the things that we use to investigate further what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in general in the Quran itself. So that is what it means by lisa'ilin, that last word, is it? That is for those who ask. Now, the question being asked here is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions 2 days and Allah mentions 4 days. Okay, so how many days are there? If you look at this verse in verse 9, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, I created the earth. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the earth in 2 days. So creation of the earth in 2 days. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says what? Bestowed blessings on earth and everything, nourishment, everything in 4 days. So mountains, blessings, nourishment in 4 days. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that the creation of heavens in 2 days. Now you add all these numbers, you easily get 8 days, not 6 days. Whereas Allah mentioned 7 times in the Quran that Allah created the heavens and the earth in 6 days, not the earth in 6 days, but both together in 6 days. But here in this Surah Fussilat, if you count all the number of days, it's 8 days. So something is amiss here, right? Something's wrong. Now, if you look at, some writings of people who try to find flaws in the Quran, try to poke, try to create, doubts in Islam itself, those who are attacking Islam, they use this as part of their arsenal of tools to attack Islam. They say that Quran is wrong, Quran is illogical, Quran is mathematically impossible. It is written by those who don't know mathematics. Why? Because just look at the creation itself. So the Quran, they don't ever say Allah said, Quran says everything created in 6 days, but here in this Surah Fussilat, if you look at that Surah Fussilat, you find that it's 8 days. So something is wrong somewhere. It means that Quran is wrong. But if you look at traditions, those companions, they received the revelations from Allah. They memorized the Quran. Surely they can detect this error. Surely they can detect that, hey, how come in all other 6 verses or 7 verses of Quran, Allah mentions that creations of heavens and earth in 6 days, but in Surah Fussilat, you add them, becomes 8 days. So they must ask the Prophet ﷺ, how come there is this discrepancy, this difference between number of days? But there's no hadith. Nothing being reported that the companions asked the Prophet ﷺ about this discrepancy between these 2 numbers. So it means that the companions knew very well that there is no discrepancies. The companions understand fully what it means by 6 days and these 2 verses in Surah Fussilat that mentions somehow 8 days. They knew perfectly. There is no discrepancy at all. Why? Because it's their language. We have to understand Arabic language fully well before we can appreciate the Quran and its meaning. We cannot just rely on translations. And that is why, after the age of the companions, right, those who became Muslim, embraced Islam, or those majority of them were non-Arabs. Arabic language is not their mother tongue, is maybe their second language. Just like we talk English is our second language, and our mother tongue might be Chinese, Malay, or whatever language that we speak at home or we comfortable with. But English is always our second language. That is the thing. Okay, so their mother tongues is not Arabic language, so they cannot appreciate the nuances, the beauty of Arabic language. So when they read the Quran, they started to ask questions. How come there is a discrepancy between these 6 days and these 8 days? And therefore, after that, scholars have to come in, those who studied about Arabic language, and they attempt to educate and tell Muslims in their books what originally these 8 days mean. There is no discrepancy. And so we can find in the book of Tafsir, especially in the Tafsir book of Fakhrul Razi, who came much later, but he, of course, he took it from earlier scholars. And he said that there's no discrepancy because that is the way the Arabs use their language or the way they speak. And the Quran was revealed according to the Arabic language, the way how the Arabs use their language. So it is actually 2 days in 4 days. How? This is the analogy given by scholars. Okay? The Arabs, if they say that I travel from one place to another, from this place to then to another place, and they can use this form of syntax. I use this, of course, the Arabs never use Kuala Lumpur and Ipoh, but I use this example that we can relate with. So if I say, right, if I'm an Arab and I say, I traveled to Kuala Lumpur in 3 hours. Yeah, whether I travel by train or by flight or by driving very fast, 3 hours, I can reach Kuala Lumpur. And then I said, I traveled to Kuala Lumpur in 3 hours and then to Ipoh in 5 hours. The English language and the Malay language, I do not know about the Chinese language, I only know these 2 languages. We understand that, oh, you travel to Kuala Lumpur means you travel from whatever place, maybe Johor, maybe Malacca, or maybe Batu Pahat, wherever. You travel to Kuala Lumpur and it took you 3 hours. But then after that, from Kuala Lumpur to Ipoh, you took 5 hours because that's how we understand your sentence structure. I traveled to Kuala Lumpur in 3 hours from my place and then to Ipoh in 5 hours. So people understand that, oh, then after that, Kuala Lumpur to Ipoh in 5 hours. But actually, the Arabs never meant that. The Arabs, when they speak like that, it means that I traveled to Kuala Lumpur and then to Ipoh, right? All this journey from beginning to end, from my starting point to Ipoh, it took 5 hours. But in between that, I traveled to the first place, which is Kuala Lumpur. I took 3 hours. So it means that I traveled to Kuala Lumpur in 3 hours, and then from KL to Ipoh is another 2 hours. So the whole journey took 5 hours. So that's how the Arabs use their language. When they speak like that, I traveled to Kuala Lumpur in 3 hours and then to Ipoh in 5 hours, means the whole journey is 5 hours. So when Allah SWT says here, right, Allah created everything, the earth in 2 days. And then Allah SWT said, I put everything on earth, blessings, mountains, and everything in 4 days. So actually these 4 days here, it includes the first 2 days of creation. So it's just basically the same syntax that the Arabs use. I traveled to here 2 hours and I will travel to there 4 hours. So that 4 hours is the total journey. So the total creation is 4 days. Allah just mentioned the first creation of the earth, right, in 2 days. Then after that, the nourishment, the mountains, whatever on earth, another 2 more days. So the whole thing is 4 days. So that is what it means. Creation of earth in 2 days, creation of things on earth, the mountains sustained, etc., in 2 days. So total 4 days. So there's no discrepancy. So those who try to poke to find any errors in the Quran, right, by using this verse, actually they do not understand the Arabic language. Okay, so we have covered on the sources of the Quran. After this, we're going to move on to the second source, which is the Hadith itself, and that is where we have to have a longer discussion. Okay, so I'm going to stop here. If you have any question, you can put in the chat box. If not, we're going to end our session tonight. Okay, let's see. Okay, there's no question here. Okay. So thank you very much. We'll meet again, inshallah, next week, same time, same channel, Zoom. Thank you. Maybe as we end with Tasbih Kafara and Suratul Asr. Subhanakallah bika asyhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Wal 'asri innal insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa 'amilus solihat wa tawasaw bil haqq wa tawasaw bis sabr. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.